Hi, I'm Leah. My dad sold the 160-year-old house my grandma left me. To cover his new wife's debt, he told me it was just business, said grandma never put it in writing, except she did. Then he called the police on me, kicked me off the porch I grew up on, and told the neighbors I was just the help. Now I'm sitting here, alone in a house that used to be mine, wondering how a daughter becomes a stranger in her own family. What makes someone rewrite history? And think I wouldn't fight back? The sun was still up when I pulled into the driveway, though it had started that slow, syrupy descent that painted the edges of the old oak trees golden. From the curb, the house looked the same, at least at first glance. The white trim still framed the deep blue shutters, and the porch swing creaked with the weight of the evening breeze. But I noticed the difference as soon as I stepped out of the car. The sound. There was music coming from the backyard, something upbeat, tinny, the kind of playlist a teenager might throw together for a backyard barbecue. That wasn't unusual in most neighborhoods, I guess. But in my grandmother's house, it was jarring. I stood there for a moment, keys in my hand, staring at the back of the house as laughter echoed through the trees. I hadn't been told about a party. No one had called. No one had texted. The only voice that had spoken to me lately belonged to my father, and even that had become increasingly rare since his new wife moved in. Zoraida. I made my way around the side gate, brushing past the hydrangeas that used to be my grandmother's pride. Half of them looked half dead now, either overwatered or forgotten. That's when I saw the guests. Strangers. The backyard had been transformed into a social mixer. Tables with white cloths, wine glasses clinking, plates stacked with catered food. I recognized none of the faces. Zoraida floated in the center like a well-trained hostess, laughing just a beat too loud, her hand on the forearm of a man I assumed was one of her cousins. She wore a white linen dress and hoop earrings the size of bracelets. Orville, my father, stood near the grill with a beer in hand, chuckling at something a younger man had said. He looked relaxed, at peace. I hovered for a second on the edge of the grass, unsure if I should step in or just turn back. But then Zoraida caught sight of me. "Oh, Leah," she said, loud enough to draw a few heads. "Didn't know you were stopping by today." Didn't know? This was still my home. At least, it had been. I gave a slight nod and stepped onto the patio. My father looked at me then, for half a second, then turned back to his conversation. Zoraida returned to her hosting duties like I'd been nothing more than a ghost who passed through the frame of a photo. She introduced the woman next to her as her sister from Tampa, then a man from her book club. Each person greeted her with affection and familiarity. No one asked who I was. She never said, not once. I moved through the patio into the house. The air inside was cooler, both in temperature and tone. The smell of lemon oil and old wood hit me, familiar and soft. I walked into the living room expecting to see the portrait of Grandma Eulalia hanging over the mantel. Gone. I blinked, stepping forward as if getting closer would change what I saw. In its place was a modern, abstract canvas, something with blocks of muted green and gold, the kind you'd pick up at a chain store. The wall had been painted pale gray, like the inside of a doctor's office. The floral chair my grandmother had always used sat nowhere in sight. A new leather recliner had taken its place. My chest tightened. I found Zoraida again in the kitchen. "When did the living room get redone?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She didn't look up from the tray she was arranging. "Oh, last week. Thought the place could use a refresh." I stared at her. "She would have understood," she added, finally glancing at me. "It's just paint and furniture, Leah." But it wasn't. It was everything. That night, I stayed in the kitchen after the guests had settled in the backyard again. The noise drifted in, laughing, glasses clinking, someone yelling over a joke I couldn't hear. I sat at the old kitchen table, the one with the scratch on the left corner from when I spilled cranberry juice during a Thanksgiving years ago. I rested my palms against its surface, staring at the wood grain, willing myself not to cry. This was the room where Grandma used to make tea at 3 p.m. Sharp, where we'd sit and go over grocery lists, talk about her garden, where she'd rest her thin hand over mine and whisper, "This house will always be yours, baby girl." But tonight, It didn't feel like mine. It didn't even feel like hers. I looked out through the window over the sink. Dad was standing with his arm around Zoraida, both laughing like they were at a comedy show. He hadn't said a word to me. Not one, not even when I walked past him. Maybe he didn't know what to say. Maybe he didn't want to start something. Or maybe he just didn't care. I got up slowly, took one last look at the kitchen, and began walking toward the front hallway. I didn't know where I was going, just that I couldn't stay in the kitchen anymore. As I passed the living room, I caught a snippet of conversation. Zoraida's voice. Sweet, sharp. I've finally made this house feel like mine. She laughed. The guest laughed with her. And I stood there, just on the other side of the wall, every part of me going still. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't slam a door or shatter a plate. I just stood there in the hallway, gripping the edge of the wooden chair I'd once polished with lemon oil and vinegar, like somehow the grain beneath my palm could anchor me. It didn't. Instead, I walked out the front door, past the strangers still sipping from wine glasses in my grandmother's garden, and got in my car without a single word. I drove without a destination, just miles of silence and rising heat pressing against the windshield. 3 days later, I was standing in line at the county clerk's office. I'd meant to file a change for a minor utility account still listed under Grandma Eulalia's name. Nothing legal, just routine. The office was quiet except for the hum of old fans and the sound of someone tapping a pen against a clipboard nearby. The woman behind the counter, glasses slipping down her nose, took my papers and typed something into her computer. She paused, frowned, typed again, then looked up at me. Are you Leah? I nodded, unease rising. She said, her voice dropping just slightly. It looks like this property's already been transferred. It's under new ownership. I blinked. That can't be right. There must be a mistake. She turned her monitor toward me. There it was, in black and white. A property transfer dated last month. From Orville Hartwell to a limited liability company. My stomach dropped. Do you know who bought it? I asked. She hesitated again. I shouldn't be giving out too much, but it's an investment firm based in Atlanta. Looks like a holding group, nothing personal listed. All paperwork went through your father's name. The room spun for a moment. I thanked her, though I don't remember how, and walked outside into the blinding Georgia heat. I stood on the sidewalk, phone still in my hand, unsure of what to do next. Grandma's voice floated up in my memory, not loud, not forced, just gentle, like always. This house is your anchor, Leah. No matter what happens out there, you'll always have a place to come home to. But now, that place had a deed, and it didn't have my name on it. I unlocked my car and sat behind the wheel, too stunned to drive. That's when my phone buzzed, a voicemail from my father. I pressed play. Leah, look, let's not make this into something it's not. Things change. People move on. Just try to be reasonable about this, okay? Reasonable. I stared at the dashboard for a long time before finally turning the key in the ignition. I needed to see it for myself. The house looked unchanged from the front, same porch swing, same shutters, but I didn't go through the main door. I parked around back and entered through the side, just like I had 100 times before. I walked slowly through the hallway, the wooden floors creaking beneath my feet, and then I stopped. The back hallway, that wall. My grandmother had carved something into it years ago, just a small inscription, shallow but legible, right beneath the hallway sconce. For Leah, who keeps the fire. It was gone. The wall had been painted over in a dull, impersonal white, the kind that looked clean but said nothing. I reached out and ran my fingers along the spot. If I squinted, I could still make out the faintest trace of the carving, like a whisper trying to survive through silence. I stood there for a while. Just stood. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe a letter in the mail. Maybe a family meeting. Maybe something that felt less like being erased. Later that evening, I found Dad on the porch. He was reading the paper, legs crossed like he had no idea the ground under my feet had shifted forever. I sat beside him without saying a word. After a long pause, I asked, "When did you decide to sell?" He didn't look up from the paper. It's not about decisions, Leah. She never filed anything formal. It was still in my name. You can't live off memories. My throat tightened. She told me it was mine. She promised. He folded the newspaper slowly, like we were discussing the weather. And I'm telling you, he said, eyes finally meeting mine. This was the practical thing to do. There was nothing else to say. I left before sunset. Drove back to the tiny one-bedroom rental I'd been staying in on the edge of town. I sat at the kitchen table, still wearing the same blouse from earlier, now wrinkled with hours of tension. I opened my laptop to answer some emails, anything to take my mind off the weight on my chest. That's when I saw it. An unread message with no subject. No sender I recognized. I clicked. Inside was a single attachment. Eulalia will scan 2018.pdf. I didn't recognize the email address. No subject line. Just a single PDF attachment with a name that stopped my breath. Eulalia will scan 2018.pdf. For a moment, I just stared at it, the cursor hovering above the file like a plane circling a storm. My hand trembled slightly as I clicked. It opened with a soft chime. I scanned the page, taking in every detail. Grandma's looping cursive at the bottom, the date, the notary seal, Mina's signature as witness. It was real. Everything she told me. It was real. The document clearly stated that the property, her house, my house, was to be left to me. No conditions, no hidden clauses, just a straightforward, heartfelt declaration of trust. I printed it. 2 copies. Put one in my purse and the other in a drawer under my tax forms. Then I drove. The late morning sun was already high, glaring through my windshield, casting long shadows against the familiar roads I used to take home from school. 20 minutes later, I was back at the house. Not my house legally, yet, but mine in every memory, every creaking floorboard. I found Dad in the backyard. He was trimming the hedges, wearing the same sun-bleached baseball cap he always had. His movements were steady, practiced, like this was just another Tuesday. "Dad!" I called, my voice level. He turned, the shears stopping mid-air. "Leah!" I walked toward him, the paper folded neatly in my hand. I offered it without a word. He took it, glanced briefly, then scoffed. "That's not filed," he said flatly. "Doesn't hold up in court. You're not a lawyer, Leah. You're just the girl who changed her diapers at the end." The words hit harder than I expected, not because they surprised me, but because he said them like they meant nothing. He handed the paper back, uninterested, and turned to pick up his coffee mug from the patio table, the one Grandma always used for her afternoon brew. Without warning, he knocked it off the edge. It shattered across the stones. He didn't flinch, just kept walking toward the side of the yard. I crouched down, collecting the ceramic shards with bare hands. The sharp edges dug into my palms, but I barely noticed. That cup had been part of a ritual, a daily moment of warmth and steadiness, and now it was just pieces on the ground, like everything else. I sat there for a while, surrounded by silence and broken porcelain, feeling like a kid again, but this time, there was no one left to tell me it would be okay. From somewhere behind me, I heard ice clinking in a glass. "You're still here," Zoraida said lightly. I stood, brushing dust from my jeans. She was on the porch, one hand resting on her hip, the other holding a wine glass at noon like it was nothing. "I saw you with the papers," she added, taking a sip. "Let's be honest, Leah. Even if you got this place back, who would you leave it to? A cat?" Her tone was casual, cutting. I didn't answer. I could feel my jaw tightening, the words building up in my throat, desperate to be let out. But I swallowed them whole, because she wanted that. She wanted the outburst. Instead, I turned around and walked back to my car, gripping the steering wheel with both hands before starting the engine. I didn't head home. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to breathe. Eventually, I ended up in the parking lot of the old church on Cedar Street. The lot was mostly empty. Just me and the silence. I parked and sat there, eyes on the steering wheel, letting the air conditioning hum around me. What was I really? A daughter no one listened to, a caretaker who got erased. A woman standing alone in a storm that her own family built. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I almost ignored it, but something told me to check. A text from an unknown number. Just one sentence. Minna wants to see you. She remembers everything. The sun had barely crested over the tree line by the time I found myself pulling into the lot at Brookhaven Retirement Home. I hadn't packed anything, hadn't even showered, just brushed my hair, threw on a clean blouse, and got in the car. My eyes were puffy, but dry. There was no more space left for tears. I parked under a blooming magnolia and turned off the engine, letting the air conditioning run a few seconds longer before cutting it. The lot was quiet. There were no nurses milling about, no visitors laughing over early morning coffee. Just me and the building. Brookhaven looked exactly like I remembered from years ago when Grandma used to come visit her old bridge partner. The siding had yellowed. One of the shutters leaned slightly to the left, but the garden beds out front were freshly mulched, and someone had taken time to trim the roses. Inside, the front desk nurse greeted me politely and asked who I was here to see. I gave her Minna's full name. She smiled, genuinely, and buzzed me in. Mina's room was on the second floor, west wing. I took the stairs slowly, clutching the railing, unsure whether it was from nerves or simple fatigue. When I knocked, there was a pause. Then a familiar voice, soft and weathered, called out, "It's open, sweetheart." I stepped inside. Minna was in her chair near the window, a knitted blanket across her lap and a photo album open beside her. Her face lit up the second she saw me. "Well, if it isn't the firekeeper herself," she said, smiling in that way that made something inside me steady for the first time in weeks. I sat beside her, and for a few seconds, we just looked at each other. I hadn't realized how much I needed someone to look at me and see me, not as a burden or an afterthought or someone standing in the way, but as someone who mattered. "I got a message," I said softly, "saying you remembered everything." Mina gave a slow, satisfied nod. "I remember everything, honey. I remember the day your grandma signed the will. I remember the pen skipped a little when she wrote your name because she was tearing up. I remember because I was sitting right there at that kitchen table." My breath caught in my throat. "I thought maybe I was crazy," I whispered. "They said there was no will. They told me I imagined it all." Mina reached over and squeezed my hand. "That's what people do when they want power they didn't earn. They rewrite truth and call it paperwork." She turned to the photo album beside her and flipped open a secret flap in the back cover. Tucked beneath the cardboard was a small USB drive. "I made a copy," she said. "Just in case they tried to erase you." I took it with trembling fingers, pressing it against my palm like it was the most precious thing I'd ever held. "It has everything," she continued. "The signed will, scanned clear as day. Me as witness, dated, stamped. She even wrote you a note at the bottom, something about keeping the house warm for people who need it." I felt the sting of tears, but I refused to let them fall. Not there, not yet. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. Mina didn't flinch. She looked at me the same way Grandma had when I was a kid, firm but kind. "Because I was waiting for you to stop surviving and start fighting. I knew you would. You're Eulalia's granddaughter." That was the moment I knew. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone. And I damn sure wasn't going to stay quiet. I left Brookhaven an hour later, a different woman than the one who had walked in. The sky was brighter. My spine was straighter. Back at my apartment, I climbed the narrow stairs 2 at a time, opened my laptop, and plugged in the USB. Every document was there. I copied them to 2 separate cloud drives and printed 3 hard copies. I slid one into a folder labeled Legal, another into my purse, and the third I tacked to my fridge with a magnet shaped like Georgia. The next morning, a courier envelope was waiting at my door. No return address. Inside was a thick packet of legal documents, a settlement offer. $25,000. If I agreed to waive all rights to the house, if I stayed quiet. Deadline, 72 hours. My father had signed it. His handwriting was clinical. No note, no apology. I stood at the kitchen counter, rereading it, my stomach tightening. I called my brother, Darvin. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice groggy. Leah? I need to ask you something, I said, skipping pleasantries. Did you know about this? The offer? There was a pause. Yeah, he admitted. Dad told me last week. And you didn't say anything? Another pause. I didn't want to get in the middle. You are in the middle, I snapped. We all are. Look, Leah, we all got a little something. Don't burn everything to the ground over one house. It's not worth it. I didn't say goodbye. I hung up and tossed my phone onto the bed. It was worth everything. That night, I sat with every document spread across the floor of my apartment. I scanned, printed, backed up again. I wrote out a timeline. I labeled folders. I numbered evidence. They wanted quiet. They wanted shame. They'd get something else. I picked up the phone and called Felix Harmon, an old friend from college who'd gone into family law. He answered with his usual dry wit. Leah Hartwell. Now there's a name I haven't heard in a while. What kind of mess are you in? I need to open a case for property fraud, I said. I have proof. He didn't ask for an explanation, just told me to come by with everything I had. That was Felix, cut straight to the bone, no fluff, no filler. It was one of the things I always appreciated about him, especially now. The next morning, I drove to his office, a modest two-story building tucked behind a dental clinic and a dry cleaner. Felix didn't do big-time corporate law. He'd built a reputation on messy estates, small business battles, and the kind of family drama nobody wanted to admit made up half the county court's calendar. His receptionist offered me coffee. I declined. My stomach wasn't going to accept anything right now, not even air. I handed him the folder. He spread the documents out across his desk, brow furrowing deeper with every page. The printed will, Mina's statement, the scanned file from the anonymous email, screenshots of text messages, voicemail transcripts, my own summary timeline. When he looked up, his voice was calm but laced with an undercurrent I hadn't heard since college finals week. You've got more than enough for a case. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is deliberate. This is fraud. I nodded, but I didn't smile. He leaned back, folding his hands. Once we file this, there's no going back. They're not going to welcome you to Thanksgiving dinner after this. They lost me, I said, the day they sold her house behind my back. Felix nodded once, then started typing. By noon, the complaint was drafted. I read every word before signing, twice. When it was done, I sat in my car outside his office and let the weight settle in my chest. I didn't feel better. I felt clear. Later that afternoon, I drove to the old house. I knew it was a risk. But there were still a few things of mine in the attic. Photo albums, Grandma's baking tins, an old cedar box with my name carved in the lid. I wanted them. I needed them. Zoraida answered the door before I even knocked. She must have seen me pull up from the window. She stood there in her house slippers, lips pressed thin. You need to leave, she said, arms crossed. I just want my things from the attic, I said evenly. I won't touch anything else. Orville appeared behind her, moving slower than usual, rubbing his shoulder like he'd just come in from yard work. You were told not to come back here, he said. You're not welcome on this property. This was my home, I replied. I grew up in this house. That was then, he snapped. Now it's not your business. I have a legal right. He cut me off. We'll let the police sort it out. And that was that. Minutes later, 2 officers arrived. One looked barely old enough to drink. The other had a gut that told me he hadn't run in years. I handed them my ID, pointing to the address on it. This address. The older officer scratched his head. You lived here recently? For years, I said, until they forced me out after my grandmother passed. Do you have anything in writing showing ownership? I swallowed. Not here, but I have a legal case pending. The younger cop looked between me and Orville, who was standing smugly on the porch now, Zoraida behind him, pretending not to gloat. We can't mediate civil claims, the older one said, not unkindly. You'll have to go through the courts. Right now, they're listed as property owners. I nodded. I understand. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I turned back to my car, carrying only a plastic storage bin I'd kept in the back seat and my grandmother's Bible, which I always brought with me in moments like this, not because I was overly religious, but because it reminded me who I came from. As I walked down the driveway, I caught the eye of Mrs. Callahan from across the street. She stood behind her screen door, hand on her walker, watching everything. She didn't say a word, but when our eyes met, she gave me a slow, deliberate nod. That night, I wrote a letter. I didn't address it to anyone. I didn't sign it with anger or hope, just facts, a copy of the will, the scan, and one handwritten note Grandma had tucked into my birthday card a year before she passed. The house is yours. You earned it tenfold. I folded the pages neatly, placed them in a certified envelope, and drove back to the house. The porch light was off. I slid the envelope into the mailbox without hesitation. No note. No threat, just the truth. The next morning, I logged onto my social media and posted a single sentence. Sometimes, silence isn't peace, it's complicity. I've been quiet long enough. I didn't tag anyone, didn't name names, but I didn't have to. The comments poured in. Old neighbors, former classmates, even a few of Grandma's church friends. Some were cautious, some sympathetic, others quietly outraged. A few people sent direct messages offering support. I didn't respond. I just needed them to know I wasn't hiding anymore. Around 5 that evening, as the light began to fade and the cicadas started their nightly chorus, an email pinged into my inbox. From the county court. Subject, petition status. I clicked. Your petition has been accepted. A court date is scheduled. I exhaled slowly, folded the letter, and said to myself, it begins now. Then I pulled the yellow legal pad toward me, the one with dog-eared corners and ink stains from years ago when Grandma taught me to balance her checkbook. Oh, funny how war often starts with paper. Over the next 2 hours, I built a binder thicker than my senior thesis. Every document, emails, printed texts, notarized scans, statements, photos of the house before Zoraida painted over everything, went in its own tab. Each page was labeled, cross-referenced, and backed up twice online. Felix called around dinner time, asked how ready I was. You don't need to memorize the whole thing, he said. Just speak to what's true. Practice saying, this wasn't just property, it was legacy. Let that be your anchor. I repeated the sentence out loud several times that evening until it didn't tremble in my throat anymore. The next morning, while reorganizing an old box of family photos I'd nearly tossed, I found a picture of Grandma and me sitting on the porch swing. I must have been 8. She had her arm wrapped around me, her eyes squinting against the sun, and I was laughing so hard my teeth showed crooked in the corners. On the back, in fading ink, she'd written, "You're the firekeeper, Leah. They'll try to snuff you out. Don't let them." I slipped the photo into a cheap gold frame and set it beside my testimony notes. The town started whispering before I said anything publicly. That was the thing about places like ours. Once a story starts moving, it travels faster than wind. It began with an anonymous post in a local Facebook group. She lived there, took care of the old woman. They sold the house behind her back. I didn't comment, I didn't share it, but I saved a screenshot, just in case. Zoraida jumped in, of course. She always did. Posted a polished, passive-aggressive response. There's a lot more to the story than folks assume. We did what was best for everyone involved. Change isn't always easy, but it's necessary. That was all it took. The thread exploded. Some people defended her. Others asked questions. A few made cutting remarks about her renovations. I stayed quiet. But every word they wrote, I filed away like a puzzle piece. A week later, the local newspaper did a short lifestyle feature on home transformations around Savannah. It was the kind of fluffy content they used to bury between political op-eds and bake sale announcements. There she was, Zoraida, smiling in front of the porch like she owned the world. The caption read, "This dusty old house needed life. We gave it a soul again." I stared at the article longer than I meant to. The gall, the calculated erasure. I could feel my jaw tighten, my shoulders stiffen, but I didn't let myself react. I just closed the browser and whispered, "Let her keep talking. The more she says, the worse she'll sound in court." I began walking the neighborhood again in the afternoons, not to talk, not to cause a scene, just to be seen. I waved at neighbors, stopped for polite hellos, petted a few dogs I recognized from childhood. The air felt different in that part of town, heavier maybe, but I made sure my presence lingered like incense after church. I saw Orville once. He was sitting on the porch, back straight, staring into nothing. When he spotted me, his jaw tensed. He didn't speak, just watched. Zoraida pulled the curtain shut not long after. That night, just as I was organizing the next batch of paperwork for court submission, my phone rang. It was Felix. I hadn't spoken to him since the last round of paperwork was submitted. "You sitting down?" he asked. No preamble. I sat. "Tell me." "We just got confirmation. They're filing a countersuit." I paused, gripping the armrest. "On what grounds?" "Emotional harassment," he said. "They're claiming your public comments and presence in the neighborhood are causing them distress." I let the silence stretch long enough to hear my own pulse. "Leah?" "I'm here," I said calmly. "Let them try. I've got truth. They've got theatrics." He chuckled. "That's the attitude." "I'll start drafting our response." I ended the call and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, thinking not of the countersuit, not even of the courtroom, but of Grandma's note on the back of that photo. "They'll try to snuff you out. Don't let them," I whispered back. "Not a chance." I didn't even flinch. "Good," I said. "Let's show them what emotional abuse really looks like." Felix chuckled low into the phone. That's the fire I wanted to hear. By the time the court date arrived, the morning air was sharp with the kind of chill Savannah rarely held onto past sunrise. I wore Grandma's old brooch, a small silver leaf with a chip near the edge, pinned to the lapel of my navy blazer. It wasn't luck. I didn't believe in that anymore. But it reminded me who I was walking in for. The courthouse smelled like coffee and old floors. I found Felix already inside, his tie loose around his collar, flipping through our binder one last time. His legal pad was marked in 3 colors, with yellow sticky tabs blooming from every edge. "You ready?" he asked, not looking up. "As I'll ever be." We didn't speak again until we were called in. Inside, the room was bigger than I expected, but it still felt small, especially with Zoraida seated across the aisle, perfectly composed in her cream-colored suit, and Orville beside her, avoiding eye contact like it cost him something. Their lawyer, a man in an expensive gray suit with perfectly trimmed facial hair, stood with an air of confidence that made me want to throw my grandmother's brooch at him. He opened strong, too strong, claimed I was emotional, unstable, and unfit to handle any estate matters. He used the phrase resentful caretaker more than once. I didn't react. I just watched him. He made the mistake of treating me like I was fragile. That was his first error. When it was our turn, Felix stood slow, deliberate. "We're not here to argue emotions," he said, walking toward the judge. "We're here to look at facts. A legally signed, witnessed will, multiple forms of corroborating documentation, and witnesses who watched this young woman care for her grandmother until the day she passed, while the so-called plaintiffs never lifted a finger." He handed the judge the folder. When the judge opened it and began reading aloud the line, "To my granddaughter Leah, sole heir of the 160-year-old estate located on South Whitaker Street." The entire room shifted. Zoraida's shoulders straightened, but she didn't speak. Orville stared at the table like the wood grain had the answers. Felix didn't stop there. He called Mina first. She walked slowly to the stand, holding a cane in one hand and her church purse in the other. When she raised her right hand to swear in, her voice didn't shake. She told the court exactly what she'd told me, that she was there the day the will was signed, that she read it herself, and that my grandmother's only concern was that I'd be too soft-hearted to fight if anything ever went wrong. Next came the neighbors. One by one, they affirmed the same truth. I'd lived there, cared for the house and my grandmother, They'd never seen Zoraida until after Eulalia's funeral. It was clear, crystal. And then came the twist neither side saw coming. Felix handed over a new document, an inspection report dated just weeks after the sale to the LLC. It revealed that Zoraida had listed the house as vacant, previously abandoned, in disrepair. The same house I had lived in, maintained, loved. The judge raised an eyebrow. Abandoned? Zoraida looked to her lawyer, who gently placed a hand on her arm, silently signaling her not to speak. She opened her mouth anyway. "Well, it needed life," she said. "It was falling apart." Felix smiled, just a hint. "And yet you claimed full renovation credit in the Savannah Post article dated last month." He dropped the printout on the bench like it was a gavel. The judge skimmed it, glanced toward Zoraida again, and said simply, "This will require deeper review." Then came the part that made my skin tighten. The judge paused, looked around. "I'm granting a temporary injunction on the transfer of the deed. No further renovations, sales, or filings are to be made on the property until we complete review of potential fraudulent activity in the sale." Zoraida gasped audibly. Her lawyer whispered something sharp. Orville, on the other hand, slumped slightly. His eyes didn't rise. And then, softly, barely above a whisper, I heard him mutter toward her, "You never loved me. You only loved her money." Zoraida shot back without missing a beat. "I loved a man. You became her shadow." It was ugly, honest. And in front of a room full of people, it cut deeper than anything filed on paper. I didn't smile. I didn't revel in it. I just sat there, the brooch heavy on my collarbone, and waited. When the judge finally turned back to me, his voice was firm, measured. "Ms. Leah, we'll reconvene in 30 days for final determination, but it looks very promising." I nodded once. Then I stood and walked out, shoulders square, head high, not because I'd won, but because I hadn't let them bury me quietly. It should have felt like victory, but I walked out wondering why I still felt so heavy. Felix said something to the judge, shook hands with the clerk, but the sound faded around me. I clutched the folder containing the court ruling, holding it tight against my ribs as if it might vanish if I let go. Outside, the parking lot buzzed faintly with cicadas, the kind of late spring heat that wrapped around your neck like a scarf you never asked for. I stood beside my car for a moment, eyes closed, just breathing. We'd won. The judge formally acknowledged the will, declared it valid, binding. My name, in ink and memory, was restored as the rightful heir to my grandmother's home. The fraudulent sale was reversed, and the judge hinted, almost pointedly, that a criminal investigation into the transaction was a matter worth pursuing. But all I could think about was Grandma, how quiet her presence felt now, how loud her absence had become. Later that afternoon, Felix picked me up in his old Toyota and drove us straight to the house. I hadn't been inside since the police made me leave. The locksmith met us there. 30 minutes and 2 turns of a drill later, the front door clicked open. I stepped inside alone. The house smelled like lavender and lemon floor cleaner, a scent that used to comfort me. Now it just felt artificial, like someone had tried to wipe away the past with a bottle from aisle 7. In the dining room, one chair remained untouched, the one where my father always sat. I didn't cry. I didn't touch it. I just grabbed a clean cloth from the linen drawer, draped it over the backrest, and hung a small wooden sign on the chair. Some chairs stay empty forever. By dusk, Felix had left, and I stayed behind. No music, no lights. Just me and the dust motes dancing in the last slant of sunlight through the windows. Around 7:30, I heard footsteps on the gravel walkway. Orville stood just beyond the gate, both hands resting on the metal bars like a man peering into a zoo exhibit. He didn't call my name, just stood there, then finally said, "I did what I thought was fair. I didn't think you'd fight." I didn't open the gate. I didn't step closer. "You didn't think I remembered who I was," I replied. He didn't argue, just nodded once and turned away. His back looked smaller than I remembered. That night, I turned on one light, the lamp beside Grandma's reading chair, and walked slowly from room to room. I wasn't trying to restore the past. I wasn't chasing ghosts. I was reclaiming what had been mine all along. I kept the paint Zoraida had used in the front room. The soft gray didn't bother me. It felt like a blank slate. But I brought back the floral curtains Grandma had sewn herself, still carefully folded in a storage tote. I rehung her spice rack in the kitchen, found her old cake pans in the garage, and washed them by hand. I didn't try to make the house exactly as it was. That version was gone. But I honored what mattered, and let go of what didn't. By the third day, I had almost settled into a rhythm, sanding, cleaning, patching nail holes, when I decided it was time to unpack the last box, the one with Grandma's quilts. Each one had a name embroidered in the corner. Morning Meadow, Carolina Fall, Eulalia's Garden. But the one I reached for had no title stitched in, just a simple line, for Leah. So she knows she always belonged here. I draped it over the sofa, sat back, breathed. I was halfway into a mug of peppermint tea when someone knocked at the door. The porch light cast a soft glow across the entryway as I opened it. Darvin stood there, shoulders slouched, a cardboard box cradled in his arms. He didn't smile, didn't pretend. "I didn't know what to do back then," he said quietly, "but I saved your things. Figured you'd come back for them one day." "I didn't know what to do back then," he said. "I didn't either. But now I do." We sat quietly in the front room, the box resting between us like a fragile truce. Inside were some of my old journals, a stack of letters Grandma had written to me over the years, and a pair of earrings I thought I'd lost when I moved out. Darvin didn't say much, just watched as I sifted through each item with careful hands. "I found the will in her sewing basket," he finally said, his voice low. "But Dad made it sound like it didn't matter. He said you wouldn't fight." I met his eyes. "And you believed him." He looked down, guilt flashing across his face. "I didn't want to be in the middle. I didn't want to be the one who chose sides." "You did, Darvin, whether you meant to or not." He didn't defend himself, just nodded slowly. I respected that. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady. "For bringing this. I mean it." He stood, the moment heavy between us. "Some people heal with time," I added. "Others need space. I'll take the latter." No hug, no dramatic farewell. Just understanding. He walked out the door, leaving the box behind. The next day, I rose early, tied back my hair, and dug into the earth at the front of the house. The dirt was soft from last night's rain, and it crumbled easily around my fingers. I planted the rose bush where Grandma had always wanted it, right beneath the bay window where she used to sit with her crossword puzzles and tea. By mid-morning, I had unpacked the last of her quilts. I chose the softest one, the one she always kept folded at the foot of her bed, and draped it across the back of the living room couch. The pattern was simple, faded now, but the stitches were still strong. That afternoon, I walked down the hall barefoot, listening to the wood creak under each step. The quiet was different now. It wasn't empty, it was whole. Later that week, an envelope arrived. No return address. I didn't need one. Inside, a single sentence in my father's handwriting. "You won. I hope you're proud." No greeting, no apology. Just that. I folded the paper and placed it in the drawer I'd labeled unanswered things. It sat beneath a stack of old photographs, tucked away but not forgotten. I never wrote back. And yet, I wasn't angry. Some truths didn't need confrontation, some wounds didn't need picking. They just needed to be acknowledged, quietly, and left in the past where they belonged. The following Sunday, I opened the front door to the first group of women who'd come to see the space. It wasn't official, just a few people from the community who needed a place to sit, to read, to be. I didn't advertise. I didn't hang a banner. I just left the door open. They came in pairs, in silence, in curiosity. Some brought tea. Others brought stories. A few simply sat in the old chairs and cried softly without saying a word. This house, once a place where I had been cast out, now welcomed others without question. As the last woman left that afternoon, she paused in the doorway. "It feels like a real home," she said, "not just a house." I smiled and nodded. "That's what it was always meant to be." That night, I walked through the kitchen, brushed my fingers across the counter where Grandma used to cool her pies, and stood in the hallway where her words had once been carved. For Leah, who keeps the fire. Paint couldn't cover that kind of memory. Time couldn't wash it away. She didn't leave me money. She left me truth. And that was enough. I turned off the lights one by one, walked to the front door, and stood there for a long moment. I didn't get to keep my father, but I kept my name, and that was everything. Sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who betray us the deepest. Leah's story is a reminder that silence doesn't mean surrender, and that reclaiming your voice can be the most powerful form of justice. What about you? Have you ever been forced to stand up to your own family? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that cut deep and speak truth.
Hi, my name's Elisha. It started with a text from my father. Just 8 words. Locks changed. You don't have a home anymore. At first, I thought it was a joke, a bad one. But then I found my clothes in trash bags and the safe emptied. The will, disputed. My name, forged. My grief, weaponized. Now I'm piecing together what they erased, memory by memory. They called it family. But if family can sell your childhood and still sleep at night, what do you call that? Do you ever wonder what really happens behind the front door, once you're no longer welcome inside? I landed at Charleston International just past 7 in the evening. The air was sticky, heavy with early spring humidity and the faint smell of pine. I hadn't been home in 3 days. It wasn't a vacation, just a short business trip to Atlanta. But it was the first time I'd left Charleston since Mom passed away. My phone buzzed before I even stepped off the concourse. I thought it might be Verity asking if I'd landed safely. It wasn't. It was from my father. Locks changed. You don't have a home anymore. That was it. No greeting, no explanation, just a sentence. 8 words that cracked through my chest like a hammer through glass. I stared at the screen, read it again and again. I knew he was drinking again. I knew he was angry about the will. But this was something different. This wasn't a tantrum. This was exile. I didn't reply. Instead, I grabbed my carry-on and made my way toward the Uber pickup lane. On the ride home, I kept trying to come up with reasons. Maybe it was a joke, a cruel, pathetic attempt at a punchline. Maybe he didn't mean it literally. Maybe it was just one of his dramatic text rants, the kind he'd send at 2 a.m. after a few too many bottles. But the driver turned onto our street, and I already knew I was wrong. The porch light was off. The shutters were closed. No sign of anyone waiting for me. I stepped out, wheeling my small suitcase behind me, and walked up the familiar stone path. I pulled my key from my purse and slid it into the lock. It didn't budge. I tried again, slowly this time, then jiggled it. Still nothing. I tried the spare key hidden beneath the garden pot. Same result. My hands started to sweat. I rang the doorbell. No answer. I called my dad, straight to voicemail. I dialed Harlan. He answered, and before I could even speak, I heard him sigh. "I'm not getting involved, Elle," he said. "What the hell is going on? Dad changed the locks." "Look, it's been messy since Mom passed. You know that. Maybe just stay somewhere else for a while. Let things cool down." "I don't need things to cool down, Harlan. I need a key. I need my house." "It's not your house, Elisha. Not legally, not yet." I hung up. My hands were shaking now, and not from fear, from rage. I started texting people, my Aunt Carol, Cousin James, even Becky from church. No replies. I sat down on the porch steps. The air was thick with night moisture, and the wood creaked beneath me. My jeans soaked through in minutes. I pressed my phone to my chest, like somehow that would stop the feeling of being so completely discarded. Verity answered on the first ring. "He changed the locks," I said. "What do you mean?" "I mean I got back from Atlanta, went to the front door, and the damn lock won't turn. Then I checked my phone. He texted me, 'Locks changed. You don't have a home anymore.'" Silence on the other end. Then, Do you want me to come get you? No, I need to figure this out first. But thank you. I stood up, walked around to the side gate, and tried the backyard entrance. Also locked. The windows were dark, drawn shut, and that's when I saw them, 3 trash bags. Sitting under the porch light like they were waiting for the garbage truck. My bags. I walked over, unzipped one. Inside were some of my old clothes, rolled up in a way that looked more like eviction than packing. Another held bathroom stuff. The third? A photo album. My baby pictures. There was one of me in Mom's arms, sitting in front of this very house. The date scrawled in her handwriting. Elisha's first spring. I sat back on the grass, photo in hand. That's when I stopped crying. Not because I was okay, but because there was no one left to cry to. The door that had always opened for me didn't. This wasn't just about real estate. This was about memory, about blood. I looked up at the house, that old white siding and wraparound porch. My mother used to wave from it when I got off the school bus. She once told me, "This house will always be yours too, Elisha. You've given more than anyone." And now I was sitting outside like a stranger. A car drove by slowly. The driver stared. I turned my face away. I didn't want to be seen like this, like someone who no longer had a place to go. I picked up my phone and texted Dad. "Why are you doing this? Please call me." No answer. I was about to dial Verity again when I heard a rustle behind me. Probably a cat, or maybe one of the neighbors' sprinklers turning on. I didn't even look. I was too tired. Too humiliated. The bag sat there like a statement. Not just, "You can't stay here," but, "You never belonged here to begin with." By the time Verity pulled up to the curb, the street was nearly empty. She didn't ask questions. Just got out of the car, popped the trunk, and helped me gather the bags. I hadn't even realized how cold the night air had gotten until I saw my fingers shaking as I zipped them shut. Neither of us said much on the drive. The rain had started again, soft and unbothered, like it hadn't watched me get thrown out of my mother's house. When we reached her place, she handed me a towel and a warm pair of socks, like it was the most normal thing in the world to do for someone who had just been erased. I spent the night on her pull-out couch, staring at the ceiling long after she went to bed. The rain tapped the windows like it wanted in, like it was reminding me that no matter how warm the blankets were, I didn't belong anywhere anymore. By morning, the ache in my back matched the heaviness in my chest. I hadn't cried. Not again. Not since last night on the porch. There wasn't anything left to cry out, but something else woke up inside me. Not grief, not even anger. Clarity. I opened my laptop and searched for the email from 6 months ago, the one from my mother's attorney sent right after the funeral. There it was. PDF attached. File name clean and clear. Will final signed .pdf. I clicked it. I read every word, slowly, deliberately. The house, the land it sat on, the workshop out back. All of it was left to me. Not as a gesture of favoritism, as a recognition of responsibility. My mother had written, "Elisha has lived in this house, taken care of it, and supported me during my final years. I believe she understands what it means to preserve our history, not sell it." And yet, it wasn't mine, not legally, not practically, because at 9:43 a.m., when I checked the probate court site, I saw it. A petition filed by Lowell Parker contesting the will. Grounds, mental incompetence of the testator at time of execution. I stared at the screen, not blinking, not breathing. So that was the plan. I picked up my phone, called the probate clerk, straight to voicemail. I tried Mom's old lawyer, number disconnected. Verity walked into the room, still in her robe, holding a chipped mug of coffee. "You look like someone who lost a chess match before she made her first move." I gave a half laugh. "It's because I wasn't invited to play." She handed me the coffee. "Then it's time to flip the board?" It was almost noon when I finally went through the last bag I'd brought with me. I wasn't even looking for anything. I was just tired of standing still. At the bottom of my laptop case, tucked between some old receipts, and a wrinkled boarding pass. I found it. A manila folder. Mom had handed it to me maybe 8 months ago. Told me to put it somewhere safe. I never opened it. Just carried it around like a charm or a curse I wasn't ready to face. I opened it now. Inside was a single piece of paper. A drawing. Crayon on printer paper. Dated in the corner. Elisha, age 6. It was a crooked house with a red roof. Big windows. Flowers out front that looked more like colored clouds. The sun had a goofy smile on it. Above the house, I'd written in uneven letters, "This is my house. I will always protect it." I ran my fingers over the drawing, smudged lines, bent corners, the kind of thing a parent might stick on a fridge for a week before tossing. But Mom hadn't tossed it. She kept it, and she made sure I'd have it when she couldn't say it out loud anymore. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at Verity's dining table with my laptop and a pen, making a list of everything I'd paid for since Mom got sick. Bills, utilities, prescriptions, home repairs. I noted every time I took time off work to drive her to appointments. Every week I stayed instead of moving out. Every grocery run, every roof repair I hired out of my own account. This wasn't about resentment. I didn't regret a single thing. But I had to show him, that I hadn't just lived in that house. I kept it alive. Verity walked by around midnight, rubbing her eyes. "You're building a case?" "No," I said. "I'm building a map." She sat across from me, looked at the drawing next to my laptop. "Is that from when you were little?" 6. Maybe 7. I don't know. I guess I already knew then. Knew what? That love has to be defended. She didn't say anything after that, just sat with me until I finished my notes and printed a clean copy of the will for my records. Later, as I lay on her couch again, I whispered something into the dark. It wasn't a prayer. It was a promise. When I woke the next morning, the skylight above Verity's studio couch had already shifted its light across the ceiling. No dream to shake off, just a hollow pressure in my chest, reminding me that yesterday had happened, and today would be worse. I walked barefoot to the desk in the corner. My laptop was still open, but a file folder now sat neatly on top. Definitely not how I'd left it. Verity must have checked it before heading out. I opened it. Inside, an envelope from the Charleston County Courthouse. My name printed in bold. I didn't open it right away. Official paper carries its own kind of gravity. I just stared for a while, then broke the seal. Inside, a motion filed by Lowell Parker. He was petitioning the court to declare me legally unfit to inherit, citing emotional instability, past psychological counseling, and compromised mental capacity. I read it twice, then set it down. There it was. He wasn't just pushing me out of the house anymore. He was trying to erase my right to exist as my mother's daughter, to decide anything about her legacy. And the worst part? He was using the truth. Yes, I'd seen a therapist. Once. After Mom died. Her name was Elaine. I told her I couldn't sleep. That sometimes I still made 2 cups of coffee out of habit. That I dreamed the doorbell rang, over and over. That was it. But to Lowell, it was leverage. I clenched my hands, shoved the papers aside, and called Verity. "I need Mitchell." 2 hours later, we stood in front of the house. Mitchell, our childhood neighbor, former Charleston PD, met us at the curb. Older now, but steady. "I'll go in with you," he said. "If there's no court ruling and you've got proof of co-residency, you're allowed entry, unless there's an injunction." "There's not," I said. He nodded at the locksmith, already at work on the front door. We made sure Lowell wasn't home. The lock clicked, and just like that, the house stopped being a memory. It became a battlefield. I stepped into the foyer and froze. The warmth was gone. The plants Mom loved, dead. Her favorite rug? Rolled up against the wall. Dust floated in the light like the place had been picked apart. We walked down the hall. The old safe was gone, replaced with a modern one, digital keypad, spotless. Mitchell turned to me. "You put that in?" "No." I didn't even try to hide the disgust, and I doubt it holds anything. The locksmith offered to open it. A few minutes later, the door swung open. Empty, except for a stack of new notepads and a pen. No journals, no letters. Verity whispered, "It's not about the house, Elle. He's erasing her." Room by room, the same. Picture frames removed, bookshelves cleared. Even Mom's quilt was missing. My old bedroom? Gutted. Fresh paint where I'd once taped my drawings. Empty drawers. Not even a trace of dust. We left without speaking. Back in the car, I finally said it. "This isn't grief. He's not mourning her. He's eliminating her." Back at the studio, I poured a glass of water. My hands shook. My chest tightened, and then stopped working altogether. No air, no voice. My lungs locked up. The glass hit the sink. I clutched the counter like it could anchor me. Verity was there in seconds. She took my wrist. "Breathe," she said. "In through your nose. Count it." I couldn't, but she stayed until my body remembered how. "He's making you the problem," she said. "But you're not." I nodded, though I didn't fully believe her. Later, I opened my laptop and started a spreadsheet. 2 columns. Removed from property and belonged to Elisha Parker. This wasn't a breakdown. It was evidence. Every missing heirloom, every journal, every meaningful item. I logged them all. Then I opened my email. To DeWitt, Lowell's lawyer. Subject: ongoing probate dispute. Message: if your client is confident in the will's integrity and my mother's mental state at the time, I assume he won't mind explaining why he emptied her home, replaced the safe where her documents were kept, and removed every trace of her existence. Odd behavior for someone with nothing to hide. I hit send. I didn't expect a reply. People like DeWitt don't engage, they intimidate. But I wasn't looking for answers. I just wanted him to know I saw everything. The next morning came slow and gray, the kind of sky that made even the blinds seem tired. I was on my second cup of coffee when the landline rang. A dusty old thing Verity only kept for spam calls and the occasional stubborn vendor who refused to email. I let it ring twice before picking up. "Hello?" There was silence on the other end. Then a voice, cautious but clear. "Is this Elisha Parker?" "Yes," I said slowly. "Who's calling?" "My name is Marion. I was your mother's nurse during her last 6 weeks." I felt myself go still. "I wasn't sure I should call," she continued, "but I saw your name on the news last night about the probate issue. I kept something to myself, but I don't think I can anymore." "What is it?" "There was a day, a few days before your mother passed. Your father came into the room while I was changing her IV. He had this manila folder, told her she needed to sign a financial form to keep her insurance active. She was weak, she didn't understand, but she signed it anyway. He told her, if she didn't, she'd be a burden." A burden. The word hit harder than I expected. It stuck to the inside of my throat. "Are you willing to make a statement?" I asked. "I don't want anything from this. I just needed you to know. And yes, if it comes to that." After I hung up, I sat with the receiver in my hand for a long while. This wasn't just about property. This wasn't even just about a will. He'd used her weakness, used her love for him, to get what he wanted. He hadn't just stolen from her. He'd convinced her to hand it over. By noon, I was on the phone with the clinic where Mom had spent her last weeks. It took some back and forth, a couple transfers, and Verity pretending to be my advocate on file to get past the gatekeeping. But finally, someone connected me to a discharge coordinator named Tori. I explained what Marion had told me. Tori pulled up the records while we waited in silence. "There is a signed release here," she said eventually. "It authorized your father to close all shared accounts, terminate further care, and handle any remaining estate issues. But we did flag the record. It was signed under questionable mental clarity." "You flagged it?" I asked. "Yes." But he insisted. As legal spouse, He overrode the warning. I looked down at the notepad in front of me, where I'd been doodling without thinking. The word override stared back at me, scribbled in thick pen. When I hung up, Verity said, "He didn't just rewrite the ending, he forged it." That evening, I pored over old bank statements I'd printed weeks ago, but hadn't had the heart to go through. Somewhere near the bottom of the stack, I found it. A transaction that didn't make sense. 2 weeks after the funeral, $42,000 had been withdrawn from a joint account once belonging to my mother. The account had been left untouched for years. I called the bank. He was the joint holder, the representative explained. It was within his rights. Legal didn't mean ethical. It didn't mean right. I hung up and looked at the stack of statements, the photocopied will, the flagged medical records, the drawing I made as a child, and now, this. A pattern was forming. And then I remembered something else. Months before Mom died, I'd backed up some of her digital files. She wasn't tech-savvy, but she'd used voice memos to talk her thoughts out, she used to say. I pulled out the USB drive from my old laptop case and plugged it in. Dozens of files loaded. Most were nothing. Shopping lists, reminders to refill prescriptions, holiday plans. But one file, labeled March 12th night, was longer than the rest. I clicked it. My mother's voice filled the room. Tired. Slower than I remembered. But still her. I don't trust Lowell with this house. Not anymore. He doesn't see it the way Elisha does. She sees it as history, as sanctuary. He sees it as a transaction. If I say anything out loud, he'll guilt me. So I'm recording this just in case. Alicia knows what to do. I closed my eyes. Not to cry. To breathe. This wasn't just permission. It was protection, left for me when she knew no one else would step in. I printed a transcript of the memo, careful with the formatting. I added it to my binder of documentation, now over 2 inches thick, and then I opened my inbox and began writing a message to a probate attorney I'd found through a referral group for women handling contested wills. Her name was Ruth LeClaire. Her website was plain, but the testimonials were fierce. Subject: urgent probate filing. Evidence of coercion and financial misconduct. I attached everything I had. The will, the financial records, the transcript, the recording, my own breakdown of property removal, and a single paragraph explaining what Marion had told me. Before I hit send, Verity walked in with dinner, just soup and toast. She set the plate beside me. "You okay?" "I will be." She nodded, then noticed the transcript. "That your mom's voice?" "It is." She picked it up, read a few lines. "Strong woman." "She didn't start strong, she got that way." Verity smiled. "Runs in the family then." I hit send. Not because I was ready, but because I was finished waiting. The morning after I sent everything to Ruth, I woke up to an email reply stamped 6:17 a.m., sharp. One sentence. "We're moving forward." That's all it said, but I knew what it meant. No hesitation, no hedging. It was the kind of certainty I'd been chasing for weeks, months, really. Later that afternoon, as I sorted the scanned documents into folders on my laptop, Verity knocked twice on the studio door and opened it halfway. "You've got a visitor," she said, voice low. I expected it to be the process server, or maybe a courier. But it was Mitchell. He stood in the doorway like he'd been carrying something too heavy for too long. "Mind if I come in?" he asked. I nodded, waved him inside. He removed his hat as he entered, and that told me something was coming. Mitchell was raised in the South. You only take off your hat when you're about to say something respectful or serious. "I know you're going through hell," he began, "and I don't want to stick my nose where it doesn't belong. But I've got something. I think it matters." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a flash drive. "I have a security camera pointed at my driveway. Picks up the whole front of the street and a bit of your old property line. I didn't check it until yesterday. Habit, you know. But I saw your dad. Couple nights ago. About 10:45. Meeting some guy in a sedan. He hands the man an envelope, points toward your place. He set the drive on the table. I don't know what it is, but it didn't look like nothing. I opened the file that evening. The timestamp showed it was recorded just 3 days before I got locked out. Lowell stood on the curb in his windbreaker, talking to a man in a gray suit. The man opened a leather folder. They exchanged something, an envelope, thick. Then Lowell pointed, gesturing toward the house with what looked like rehearsed certainty. The man nodded, made a quick note on a clipboard, then handed him a pen. The video wasn't high def, but it didn't need to be. I paused the frame when Lowell scribbled his name. It wasn't just a hunch anymore. It was a transaction. That night, I went through my inbox again. Buried in a forwarded thread from a title office was a PDF, a scanned property transfer document. Owner listed Lowell Parker, but the signature, Elisha M. Parker, in what looked eerily like my handwriting. I pulled out an old birthday card I'd sent to my mom 2 years back, placed them side by side on the screen. At first glance, it was close. But I noticed it. The cross on the T in Parker was too short. The tail of the H didn't loop the way mine always did. Whoever had done this knew how I signed, but not well enough. By morning, I was sitting across from Ruth at her office, sparse but sharp. A plaque on the wall read, "The law doesn't care how you feel. It cares what you can prove." I handed her the folder, the drive, the printout of the signature comparison. She didn't blink once as she reviewed it all. "This isn't just unethical," she said finally. "This is a felony, and a dumb one." I almost laughed at that. "You want to hit him first, or wait till he makes another move?" she asked. "I want to stop pretending he's capable of decency," I said. She smiled without warmth. "Then we file today. Emergency injunction to halt any sale or claim of ownership, and a formal accusation of forgery." I nodded. My throat felt dry, but I didn't reach for water. I just sat there, finally still. By 3 p.m., the papers were processed. Served that evening. Ruth used a professional server. I didn't want to be there, didn't want to see the look on his face, but Mitchell offered to follow and film it. Said it might come in handy if he pulled any stunts. Later, he sent me the video. Lowell opened the door shirtless, beer in hand. The man handed him the envelope, said nothing. Lowell didn't read it right away, just stared at the name on the label. Parker v. Parker, emergency filing. He didn't look scared. He looked insulted. The same face he used to make when I corrected his math at the kitchen table, when he thought he was too smart to get caught. That night, I posted something online. Not angry, not accusatory, just honest. I didn't use names. I didn't need to. When someone forges your name and tries to erase your mother's final wish, I wrote, you don't sit quietly and hope they do better. You speak, you act, you protect what's worth remembering. It didn't go viral. That's not what I was after. But by the next morning, I had messages. 2 former neighbors, a woman from Mom's old church, even a nurse who once helped during her final months. I believe you. Let me know if you need a witness. I always wondered why he looked so nervous after she passed. That last one stuck with me. He wasn't nervous because of loss. He was nervous because he thought I'd never fight back. By the time the courthouse had received our filing, the ripple had already started reaching the shoreline. Quiet at first. Just a few uneasy glances at work, a strangely delayed email response, a colleague who canceled a meeting without explanation. Then came the meeting request from HR. It was Thursday, late afternoon. I'd just finished reviewing a presentation draft when I saw the calendar invite pop up. I knew before I clicked it what it would say. The office wasn't hostile. No one shouted. There was no confrontation. That would have been easier to respond to. Instead, it was, we just wanted to touch base, and nothing is official. We're just doing our due diligence. The kind of phrases that sound polite until you feel the floor shift underneath them. One of the partners leaned in. Elisha, we received an anonymous email. It raised some concerns. It mentioned legal proceedings and alleged that you've been treated for certain psychological issues that might compromise professional decision-making. I sat back. Do you believe it? We're not accusing you of anything, the HR manager interjected, her hands open like she was physically pushing the idea away. We just need clarification, that's all. Clarification, not truth, not proof. Just enough daylight for doubt to creep in. I told them I had a legal team, that no judgment had been made, and I was not disqualified from anything. They nodded, smiled, took notes. When I walked out of the room, I didn't feel relief. I felt stained. That night, I went back to Verity's place and stared at the ceiling. The idea that my job, the one thing I'd managed to keep steady through all of this, could now be leveraged against me felt like the final straw. But it wasn't the final straw. It was fuel. The next day, the mail came late. I was halfway through lunch when I saw the envelope sitting on the edge of the kitchen table. Ruth must have dropped it off. She never emailed things like this. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, her letterhead in clean serif font. Inside, a copy of a letter sent to her office, from DeWitt and Associates, signed by Lowell's counsel. If Ms. Parker continues this litigation, it read, our office will be compelled to disclose documentation and history that indicate prolonged psychological instability. This includes, but is not limited to, counseling sessions post-death of her mother, possible prescription history, and testimony from family stating patterns of emotional dysregulation. No threats, just a polite warning, polite like poison in tea. Verity read it over my shoulder and said, so now telling the truth about your trauma makes you unfit to speak about it. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She was right. They weren't arguing the case anymore. They were trying to destroy the witness. The following morning, I met Ruth in her office again. She wore the same simple navy blouse she always wore when things were about to get serious. She read the letter silently, then placed it face down on the table. This is intimidation. They won't release anything without a judge's order, and no judge is going to grant that unless you're on trial for a felony. Which, spoiler, you're not. I didn't blink. I want a protective order filed today, she continued. We'll include this with our affidavit and show that your father's camp is retaliating instead of defending. I can spin this into the narrative we need. No spin, I said. Just truth. No redactions. She looked up. You sure? Yes. They want me to be ashamed, but I'm not. Not of healing, not of hurting, and definitely not of surviving. She smiled faintly, then turned back to her computer. That night, I opened my post again. The same one that started all this. I clicked edit, and I added, yes, I saw a therapist. After my mother died, I didn't know how to get out of bed. I cried during meetings. I thought grief would look poetic. It didn't. It looked like silence, like checking the same drawer 5 times for a note that wasn't there, like forgetting how to answer, "How are you?" without lying. I asked for help. I received it. I got better. That doesn't make me unstable. That makes me aware. If telling the truth about my pain threatens someone else's narrative, maybe their version wasn't worth protecting to begin with. I clicked save. Then I turned off my phone and sat on the edge of the guest bed, eyes closed, listening to the rain whisper against the glass. A few hours later, I turned it back on. I had messages. From a woman I'd never met in Alabama. From a man whose sister had been institutionalized after a similar inheritance fight. From a retired nurse who'd been fired after reporting abuse from a family's caregiver. I thought I was the only one. I've never told anyone this. I didn't think anyone would believe me. I didn't respond to all of them. I couldn't. But I read every word. Lowell thought shame would make me quiet. But shame has no power once you stop apologizing for surviving. The courthouse smelled like old wood and copy toner. Familiar in a way I never wanted it to be. Ruth and I arrived just after 8 a.m., early enough to be calm, not so early that we looked anxious. She wore navy again. I wore black. Not for mourning, for clarity. We sat in the front row, just behind the petitioner's table. Lowell arrived 5 minutes before the session started. No tie. Same brown blazer he'd worn to every funeral in the last 10 years. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes never met mine. Next to him was Trina, the real estate agent who listed my mother's home without checking who owned it. She looked less polished than in her ads. Makeup a little too thick, smile a little too tight. And beside her, as expected, DeWitt. Still unreadable, still smug. The judge entered, an older woman with steely eyes and a soft voice that didn't match her command of the room. "This is a hearing to validate the will of Eleanor J. Parker," she began, "and address allegations of forgery, undue influence, and breach of fiduciary responsibility." I exhaled slowly. Ruth started our side with nothing theatrical, just order. She submitted the notarized will, the digital backups, and the scans sent to me by my mother's attorney months before she passed. Then the video. Mitchell's footage, played on a mounted screen, showed Lowell passing the envelope at 10:46 p.m. to a man later identified as a notary with suspended credentials. The judge leaned slightly forward at that moment, her hand going still above her notes. Then came the signature comparison, mine and the forged one. My tail loops, the slant of the R. It was subtle, but clear. Next, Ruth played the voice memo. "My daughter Alicia understands this house. It's not just a roof. It's where my parents planted every memory we ever had. If it goes to someone who sees it as money, not meaning, then everything dies with me." The room was silent when it ended. Even DeWitt didn't object. Then Ruth called Mitchell to the stand. He walked slowly, but spoke steadily. "I've lived next door 32 years, he said. "I saw Elisha come back home when her mother got sick. I saw her fix the porch, replace the roof, sit outside with her mom every morning, even when her mom didn't remember who she was. And I saw her father stand on the curb at midnight, handing off a document like he was selling firewood, not a legacy." Then came the unraveling. Trina, under oath, fidgeted as Ruth asked, "And at the time you listed the property, did you verify legal ownership?" "Well, he presented a signed deed," she stammered. "And did you check the chain of title?" "No, but I didn't think I had to. He said," Ruth cut in, "or he proved." DeWitt objected, but the judge waved it off. "You participated in the misrepresentation of this property," she told Trina flatly. "Whether knowingly or not, it's your responsibility as a licensed agent. That has consequences." Lowell stayed silent. For once, when it came time for the judge's ruling, I didn't expect suspense. I expected process. But her words still hit like wind against a cracked window, sharp, loud, final. This court recognizes the decedent's will as valid, properly executed, and consistent with documented intention. Ownership of the property is hereby awarded to Elisha M. Parker. All prior claims based on forged instruments or unverified transactions are null and void. Any future interference with her legal rights will be grounds for immediate contempt proceedings. There it was. No drumroll, no applause, just the sound of truth making its way into the record. Lowell didn't look at me when the judge dismissed the room. He gathered his folder, empty, I imagined, and walked out first. Trina followed, her heels clicking louder than they should have. DeWitt never even turned around. Outside, Ruth stood with me under the overhang. A reporter waited nearby, holding a mic loosely in her hand. "You want to say something?" Ruth asked. "No," I replied. "Not yet." I looked across the street at the bakery Mom used to love. Her favorite seat was still empty, the corner table by the window. "This isn't the end," Ruth said gently, "but it's yours now." I nodded. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I didn't feel victorious. I felt still. Sometimes when a fire ends, all you're left with is silence, and that's when you know it's safe to rebuild. I didn't stop for questions. I didn't pose for photos. I didn't answer the stranger, who asked if I was the daughter in the will case. I just walked, straight, steady, past the courthouse steps, past the street where I used to park before Mom's appointments, past the life I used to explain. I wasn't explaining anymore. The morning I stepped back into the house, it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like air that hadn't been breathed in weeks. The windows had been closed too long. The rooms had gone still without sound. The scent wasn't betrayal anymore. It was something quieter. Dust. Faded wood. Forgotten corners waiting to be seen again. I stood in the kitchen, took off my shoes, and pressed my hand flat against the counter where my mother used to leave notes. Reminders to thaw chicken, buy toothpaste, check on Mitchell's wife next door. That counter used to feel like the center of our home. Now, it felt like a page waiting for ink. I didn't cry. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, breathing. The next morning, a knock came at the front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, I found Harlan, my brother, standing there with a coffee in each hand. He looked unsure of which one to offer, so he held out both. "No milk in either," he said. "Didn't know how you take it these days." I didn't take either. I stepped back so he could come in. He didn't walk far, just into the foyer. "I should have spoken up," he said, eyes fixed on the floorboards. "I thought if I stayed out of it, it meant I wasn't choosing sides." "You did choose," I said. "You chose silence, and silence has weight." He nodded once, eyes still down. "I know." We stood there for a while. I didn't ask him to sit. He didn't ask for forgiveness. I wasn't ready to give it. But I didn't close the door on him either. After he left, I sat on the porch with the coffee he brought. Lukewarm now. But it gave me something to hold on to while I watched the neighborhood wake up. Later that week, I got a call from the hospital. Lowell had been brought into the ER. Liver failure, alcohol-induced. He was unconscious, no insurance, no family contact listed. Except me. A remnant of a legal document from 10 years ago. Power of attorney. I didn't ask how they found the number. I didn't ask what room he was in. I just asked what they needed. Stabilization, transfer, the woman said. He's not in immediate danger, but he won't recover without support. Do what's necessary, I replied. Bill it to me? There was a pause. He won't be told? No? Okay. I hung up. I didn't go visit. I didn't send a card. I didn't tell anyone. A few days later, Ruth called to ask if I wanted to file a restraining order now that the house was legally mine. I told her no. He's not a threat anymore, I said. Not to me. But still, she said, there's value in a boundary being official. There's more value in me setting it myself. That afternoon, I had the locks changed again. Not out of fear, out of choice. He could walk this town, he could walk this world, but he would never walk through my door again. The next morning, the sun spilled into the back room, the one I'd been preparing for months, even when I didn't know I was doing it. The floors were scrubbed, the walls painted clean, soft white. Natural light pooled across the new bench I had installed beneath the bay window. It no longer looked like a place where people were forgotten. It looked like somewhere they could finally be seen. I opened the doors to the gallery the following week. No ribbon cutting, no press. Just a small wooden sign on the sidewalk that read, "What We Inherit, Stories of Home and Survival." The walls held work from women across the state. Sculptures made from heirlooms, photographs of kitchens lost to fire or foreclosure, stitched fabric pieces made from dresses mothers used to wear. It wasn't just about grief. It was about reclamation. One frame hung near the entrance. It held nothing but a handwritten quote, centered on aged paper, with the ink just beginning to fade. A home isn't what you're given. It's what you dare to keep. Eleanor J. Parker. I stood across from that quote for a long time. People came and went, looked and nodded, some quietly wiping tears. No one asked who I was. No one needed to. At the end of the day, as I turned off the lights, I looked back one last time. The house wasn't silent anymore. It had become something else. When I locked the front door that night and turned off the last gallery light, I stood in the quiet hallway longer than I meant to. The air was still warm with the smell of coffee from the afternoon. A few visitors had stayed late, lingering over stories written in sharp ink and stitched fabric. Some had cried, some had stayed silent, but no one had left unmoved. That was enough for me. Upstairs, the windows were open to the Charleston breeze. It carried a different kind of stillness now, no longer the heavy silence of fear or confusion. This quiet hummed with presence. I poured a glass of water, sat on the edge of the bed, and let the night stretch without needing to fill it. The gallery had been open a full month. Every Saturday brought a new batch of visitors. Some were locals, neighbors who once crossed the street when they saw me coming. Others came from counties away, drawn by articles or quiet recommendation. We didn't advertise. The walls spoke for themselves. I didn't need to tell them it was mine. The house spoke in my mother's voice. In every photograph, in every quilt square, in the creak of the floorboards we never sanded down. That weekend, I stood in the entryway watching people filter through the exhibit when I noticed a familiar woman with tightly knotted hair and a faded leather purse. Mrs. Daly. She used to tutor me in math back in high school. She avoided my eyes then, looking too long at the frame near the front. Mom's quote, preserved behind glass. "I never thought I'd walk through this door again," she said quietly when she passed me. "But I'm glad I did." I smiled. Not because I needed her approval, but because I no longer needed it to survive. One morning, Ruth forwarded an update from the care facility where Lowell had been transferred. His condition had stabilized, but his finances had not. I hadn't responded to the previous reports. This time, I typed only one sentence back. "Thank you, no further updates needed." I didn't hate him. That was the strange thing. I didn't wish him pain. I just didn't wish him here. He was part of the story, but not part of the space. 2 weeks later, Aunt Avis visited. She didn't call ahead. She never had to. I found her standing on the porch just before lunch, wearing the same blue shawl she'd had since I was a girl. We sat outside with iced tea and lemon slices that kept slipping off the rim. "Heard the exhibit was turning heads," she said. I nodded. She tapped her cup gently against mine. "Your mother would have been proud. Not of what you won, but of what you refused to become." I didn't have an answer, just a quiet kind of ache that didn't hurt anymore. Later that day, I walked into the room I had once called mine. My childhood bedroom. I had left it untouched until now, a deliberate decision. No fresh paint, no reclaimed furniture, just space. The walls were bare except for one, a gallery wall of empty frames. A small sign below read, "Stories still missing. Tell yours here." Some guests pinned notes. Others left dried flowers, clippings of poems, even a photo of a woman no one could name. That wall wasn't curated. It was claimed. And I loved it more than anything else in the house. That night, as I closed up alone, I lingered in the doorway of that room. My own story no longer needed a frame. It had a foundation. I walked the length of the hallway slowly, turning off lights as I went. The soft click of each switch sounded less like ending and more like exhale. In the front room, I paused one last time. Outside, the porch glowed under a lantern Mom had insisted on keeping, even when Dad said it was too old-fashioned. She used to sit beneath it, rocking slowly, humming to songs no one else could hear. I stepped outside and took her seat. The neighborhood was quieter now. Or maybe I was just hearing it differently. I watched as a car passed with 2 kids in the back seat, pointing at the gallery window. Their mom glanced at the house, then at me, and nodded. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. I watched them disappear down the street. I didn't need to be asked if I was the daughter in the case. The daughter with the court win, the scandal, the inheritance. None of that mattered anymore. I was the woman who stayed. The woman who returned, the one who didn't let the lock stay turned forever. In the quiet of that night, with only the creak of the rocker and the weight of everything unspoken, I finally allowed myself to think of Mom's voice again. Not in sadness, in grounding. Forgiveness isn't something you give away. It's something you use to anchor yourself. It's the moment you stop letting someone else decide the shape of your life. He changed the locks once. I changed the foundation. The porch light stayed on as I stepped inside. The last thing I passed before closing the door was the old crayon drawing, now mounted behind glass in the entry hall. This is my house. I will always protect it. Hi, I'm Sable. My sister built her empire with a smile, and my name on the paperwork. They said it was a misunderstanding when she slapped me, pregnant, in front of our whole family. But the lie didn't start there. It started with quiet rooms, missing documents, a will that suddenly had my name erased. Now they want me to stay silent, for the family. But what happens when the quiet one keeps the receipts? And what if the truth I'm holding is the one thing that can break everything they built? Would you stay silent if it meant protecting the people who erased you? They forgot my name tonight, but I still remember everything my father whispered before he died. I arrived 5 minutes early, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because the longer I stayed outside in that parking lot, the more likely I was to turn the car around and go home. I'd picked the dress carefully, simple, long enough to hide the fact that I hadn't worn heels in over a year. It hugged my stomach in a way that made me pause before getting out of the car. But I came anyway, because if I didn't, they'd say I was bitter, or dramatic, or that I couldn't handle Velma's big night. The valet opened the door for the car ahead of mine. That car held Velma, flawless in her burgundy gown, stepping out like she owned the air around her. I waited. When the valet reached my door, he looked down at his list, frowned, and just said, "Name?" His voice had none of the "welcome, ma'am" warmth he used moments earlier. "Sable Forrester," I said. He nodded slowly, without looking me in the eye, and took the keys. Inside, I stood at the check-in table. A teenage girl with perfect hair scanned the guest list twice, then smiled in that uncomfortable way people do when they're trying to pretend you aren't a problem. "I don't see your name here. Maybe you're someone's +1. "No, I was invited." My voice stayed even, but my chest felt like it might split open. Behind me, a few older cousins brushed past. No hello, not even eye contact. I guess I was still invisible to them, same as I'd always been. I took a deep breath, fixed my posture, and walked inside anyway. The ballroom was all gold lights and polished marble. A string quartet played near the far end. People buzzed around round tables, covered in white linen and little signs that read, "Reserved for donors." The air smelled like perfume and power. My stomach turned, and not from the baby. Velma stood near the bar, surrounded by women in designer gowns, and men who smiled too wide. She looked straight at me for a second. No nod, no smile, then turned her head to laugh at something someone whispered in her ear. I wasn't surprised. She'd always been good at pretending I wasn't there. Lorraine, my mother, though calling her that tonight felt like a stretch, glided up beside Velma a moment later. She wore pearls that used to belong to our grandmother. When I was a child, I thought those pearls were magic. Now they just looked like a leash. She kissed Velma's cheek and smiled like this whole night belonged to her too. Then she turned and walked right past me. I might as well have been wallpaper. I sat at a table near the back. No one else joined me, not even a glance from across the room. I reached for my water and caught 2 women whispering as they looked toward me. One of them gestured subtly at my belly. "You must be exhausted, dear," the other one said, when I passed them later near the buffet. "Or are you just bloated from the hors d'oeuvres?" I didn't answer. I just smiled and walked on. There's a kind of peace that comes with not reacting. The gala was officially titled the Gideon Legacy Dinner in honor of my father. My name, not once mentioned. Velma took the mic just before dessert. She spoke about growth, leadership, family. Every sentence had the cadence of a campaign speech. "Everything I do," she said, "every step I take, it's all to honor my father's vision." She paused, looked at the ceiling like she was holding back tears. People clapped, some even stood. Behind her, a slideshow played. Photos of Gideon with colleagues, donors, grandkids. One photo of both of us. But I was off to the side, only half in the frame. I couldn't breathe. I stood up slowly and walked out to the patio. The air was cooler out there, away from the chandeliers and empty compliments. I leaned against the railing and placed a hand on my stomach. The baby fluttered gently. "I know," I whispered. "I didn't want to come either." The lights from the city blinked in the distance. For a moment, I let the silence settle. I pulled my phone from my bag and scrolled through my voice memos until I found it. "For Sable, do not share." My father recorded that note 3 months before he died. I'd never listened to it all the way through. Maybe because I was afraid it would break something inside me I hadn't named yet. But tonight I was already broken. I let the night wrap around me like a coat I didn't ask for, but didn't have the energy to take off. After leaving the gala, I didn't stop anywhere. No late-night drive-through, no gas station detour. I just drove. Windows up, radio off. My hand rested on my stomach most of the way, as if that was the only anchor I had left. The roads were wet, not quite from rain, but that sticky Georgia air that clings to everything and leaves the pavement glistening. I passed the glowing outline of the old train depot, the Waffle House on the corner, and the sign for the neighborhood I'd rented a room in. I didn't bother turning on the porch light when I got home. I knew exactly where the creaky step was. Once inside, I slid off my shoes and walked straight to the small guest bedroom at the end of the hallway. It used to belong to Lisa's oldest son before he left for college. Now it was mine, or at least mine enough to cry in without asking permission. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the bottom drawer of the nightstand. Beneath a folded towel and a bundle of old utility bills was the small metal box. It had been in my possession since the week after the funeral, passed quietly from our father's lawyer to me. No one knew I had it. I placed it on the bed and opened it slowly, like it might bite. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it. The worn-out manila folder with my name written in Gideon's slanted handwriting, the flash drive in the small plastic bag, and a cassette tape labeled in block letters. "Play when you're alone." I had a small cassette player I bought off eBay years ago for an art project. It barely worked, but I kept it. Tonight, I plugged it in, loaded the tape, and hit play. For a few seconds, all I heard was the gentle hiss of the tape turning, then his voice. My father's voice, slower than I remembered, more tired. He cleared his throat. "Hi, sweetheart. If you're hearing this, I'm gone. And I hate that we didn't get more time, but I didn't want to leave without saying this." I leaned back against the headboard, closed my eyes, and let it wash over me. Velma has always believed louder is stronger. She thinks force wins. I raised you differently. You notice what others don't. You see the cracks. That's why I gave this to you. He paused, like he was catching his breath. There are things she doesn't know I kept. Things I couldn't say when I was still alive because I was tired of fighting. But you still have time. If you need to use any of it, do it wisely. If you don't, that's your choice too. Either way, I want you to know, you were never invisible to me. I pressed pause. I couldn't keep listening, not yet. I set the box aside and walked to the tiny window above the desk. The moon was hiding behind a thick cloud. I thought about everything that hadn't been said at that gala. Everything Velma chose to highlight. Everything she carefully erased. 2 weeks before the dinner, I'd babysat her daughter, Maisie, while she attended a charity event. Maisie had always liked me, at least until she started parroting what she heard at home. That night, we were coloring at the kitchen table when she said, "Mommy says you didn't do much with your life. That's why you shouldn't talk back." I didn't respond. What do you say to a 7-year-old who's repeating a script? Now, The words circled back, like a needle stuck in a record. I wasn't surprised Velma had said it. What stunned me was how easily it rolled off Maisie's tongue. That tone, matter of fact, almost bored, like it was just a rule in their house. Gravity exists. Sable failed. Don't talk back. I turned back to the box. There was one more envelope, sealed with a plain strip of tape. I opened it carefully. Inside, a notarized copy of an older will. The date at the top confirmed it, 11 months before Gideon died. My name was listed next to Velma's, both marked as co-beneficiaries. Not a dime more, not a dime less. The version Velma read aloud after the funeral had only listed her. At the time, I didn't ask why. I assumed she won. Again. But this paper said otherwise. I reached for the flash drive, inserted it into my old laptop, and waited. A folder popped up. Dozens of files, PDFs, photos, scans of receipts, bank statements, and one folder labeled Velma Override. I didn't open it yet. I didn't need to, not tonight. I knew what was coming. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I stayed in the chair by the window, laptop screen glowing against the dark room. The folder marked Velma Override sat unopened. I wasn't ready, not because I was afraid of what I'd find, but because I already knew what it would confirm. By morning, the air felt thick and stale. I opened the window just enough to let in the early noise of the neighborhood, the low rumble of garbage trucks, someone walking a dog, the gentle ping of wind chimes across the street. Life went on like nothing had been ripped open. I made coffee in silence and sat at the table with the folder from the box in front of me. A line from my father's voice memo kept looping in my mind. You were never invisible to me. Funny how one sentence could feel like a gift and a weapon. Around 9, I logged into my father's old tax account using the credentials saved on a notepad he'd once left under a stack of utility bills. It was the kind of thing he did, hiding important information in plain sight, where only someone who really paid attention would notice. The page loaded slowly, but eventually, I was staring at property tax records for the house Velma now claimed as hers alone. But it wasn't just hers. There it was, clear as day. Previous co-owner removed due to address abandonment. I blinked. That wasn't an error. Velma had filed a change of address form without my knowledge, months before Dad died. Legally, it made it look like I had given up my claim. Abandonment. Like I was some couch someone left on the curb. I clicked through the history and saw the document. Her signature, notarized. My name, crossed out. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't confusion. This was calculated. That afternoon, I stepped out to clear my head. I walked past the local grocery store, into the small square where an old courthouse stood tucked between a bank and a boutique that sold overpriced soaps. I remembered coming here with Dad once, years ago, to renew a vehicle title. The smell of the wood-paneled hallways hadn't changed. Neither had the man at the front desk. I'm looking for a copy of a will, I said, filed after Gideon Forrester's passing. The clerk tapped his keyboard. Filed under Hanley? No. Forrester, I corrected him. My father didn't legally change his name to match Velma's after their mother remarried. He kept his. The man blinked at me, then nodded and resumed typing. You're the second person to ask about this will. My breath hitched. Who was the first? He didn't even look up. A woman named Velma Hanley came in 2 days before the funeral, seemed in a hurry. I thanked him, barely remembering how I walked out of there. Back at the house, I closed my bedroom door and locked it. Not because I feared anyone would barge in, but because I needed one space in my life that I could control. I sat on the bed, pulled out a notepad, and started listing every time Velma had positioned herself as the one who stayed. Stayed? Is that what she told people? She didn't stay when I took Dad to his chemo appointments. She didn't stay when his tremors got worse, and I had to help him sign checks. She didn't stay when he forgot how to use the remote and called me in tears. Velma stayed when it made her look good. When there was a gala, a fundraiser, a ribbon cutting, she stayed for the applause. But when it was just me and Dad in a house that smelled like medical wipes and soup, she was nowhere. I remembered one night, a few weeks before he passed. I was sitting next to him in the den. He was wrapped in that old army blanket, the one he refused to throw away, even though it scratched like sandpaper. He turned to me and said, "Don't be loud, Sable. Be exact." At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. Now I did. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to plead. I was going to be precise. So I backed up the files. I scanned the documents. I uploaded the voice memo to an encrypted drive. I labeled everything clearly. For legal use. Original will. Handwriting match. Forgery evidence. I didn't call a lawyer yet. Not because I didn't want to, but because I wanted the next step to be on my terms. I wasn't here to win a fight. I was here to make sure the fight was recorded. The next few days passed like wet concrete, slow, heavy, and impossible to move through without effort. I didn't rush to do anything. I just let the weight of what I knew settle in all the right places. But by Sunday afternoon, I got a message from Lorraine. Just 3 words. Dinner at 6. No explanation, no apology, no question mark. At first, I didn't plan to go. Then, I remembered something Velma once said during an argument years ago when I asked why she always made things look like I was the one pulling away. "You never show up, Sable," she snapped. "Then you act hurt when no one's waiting for you." So I showed up. By the time I arrived at Lorraine's, the sky had already gone gray with a southern drizzle. The kind of light rain that didn't soak you, just stuck to your skin like sweat. I parked on the curb and sat in the car for a minute before getting out. My stomach felt tight, and not just because of the baby. When I stepped through the front door, the house smelled like pot roast and tension. Velma's car was already in the driveway, so I knew I wasn't walking into an ambush, at least not alone. The table was set like nothing had ever happened. China we only used on holidays, candles and silver holders, and chairs that creaked under the silence. Lorraine greeted me with a nod, as if we were strangers meeting at a bank appointment. Velma didn't look up from her phone. I slid into the last empty chair, directly across from her. No one said anything about the gala. No one said anything about the pregnancy. No one said anything at all. Plates passed around me, not to me. Conversations happened over me, not with me. I might as well have been the extra chair they forgot to fold up. I didn't force small talk. I just ate quietly, chewing each bite like it had something to prove. At one point, a cousin asked Velma how the foundation's numbers were looking this quarter. She laughed and said, "Well, they're not Sable-level spreadsheets, but I manage." Everyone chuckled. Even Lorraine. No one looked at me. After dinner, I stood to gather my plate, but Lorraine beat me to it. "Leave it," she said without meeting my eyes. "Come help me in the kitchen." The kitchen was warm and too clean, like it had been wiped down twice before I arrived. Lorraine stood at the sink, rinsing dishes with slow, practiced movements. I stood beside her, waiting for her to say something real. Instead, she said, "I know you think you're doing what's right." I said nothing. She continued, still staring at a plate she hadn't moved in over a minute. "But this family's held together by more than facts. It's held together by dignity." "Is that what you call rewriting someone out of a will?" I asked quietly. Her shoulders tensed, but her tone stayed calm. "Don't escalate this, Sable. It's not good for the baby, or the family name." That sentence hung in the air like mildew. "You know what's not good for the baby?" I said. "Being raised to believe truth is optional." She put the plate down. Not gently. "This isn't about truth. This is about keeping peace." "No," I replied. "This is about keeping Velma clean, even when she's been playing in the mud." Lorraine turned off the faucet and dried her hands. She still wouldn't look at me. "I'm tired, Sable. I'm too old for this." I stepped back. "Then don't stand in my way." I left without saying goodbye. Driving home, the rain had picked up just enough to blur the edges of the streetlights. I didn't turn on the radio. My thoughts were loud enough. They think they've won. They always do when they're quiet, when they can get you to question your own memory. when they pass dishes and conversations around you like you're just the draft of someone more acceptable. But I wasn't a draft. I was the final copy. Back at the house, I made tea I didn't finish. I opened my laptop and pulled up the drive again. Every file I had, every receipt, email, financial breakdown, was now part of one big document, organized and backed up in 3 separate places. I wasn't preparing to fight. I was preparing to document. I clicked on the audio file labeled Velma Audit Notes. It started with a cough and the familiar rattle of my father's voice. If anything happens to me, show this to the board. Velma can't access these files without Sable. The clip ended abruptly, like he didn't get to finish the sentence, but he'd said enough. I stared at the screen, then whispered out loud, "You trusted the quiet one." And now, the quiet one is almost ready to speak. The day started quiet, but not the peaceful kind. The kind where the sky's too blue, the coffee tastes like cardboard, and your body knows before your mind catches up that something is about to split wide open. I had slept 3 hours. My phone buzzed at 7:32 a.m., a reminder I didn't set, but one I hadn't deleted either. Donor brunch, Velma Hanley Foundation. I hadn't RSVP'd. Of course not, I wasn't invited. But I showed up anyway. By 10:10, I was walking into the Heritage Club downtown, just as the first tray of mimosas floated by. The room was glossy, gold-rimmed china, white roses at every table, tall windows framing the water beyond like a portrait. Every seat had a personalized name card except mine. No one stopped me at the door. That's the funny thing about looking like you belong. People believe you do. Velma was at the podium, mid-sentence, tossing out phrases like transparency, impact, and generational change, the way some people hand out Halloween candy, cheap and eager to impress. She didn't see me at first. I kept my posture easy, casual. Just another woman in flats, holding a small purse and a smile. I didn't need to interrupt her speech. I had something better. 2 donors stood near the table, where coffee was being refreshed. I recognized one, Mrs. Denton, from the City Library Board. The other, Mr. Calder, ran one of the state's civic grant programs. I leaned in, calm. "Would either of you like to see the actual year-end report?" I asked. Mrs. Denton blinked. "Excuse me?" I offered them each a 1-page printout, just enough to raise a brow, not enough to explain everything. This came straight from the foundation accountant, the parts Velma didn't include today. Mr. Calder looked at me like he wasn't sure whether to call security or offer me his chair. And that's when Velma saw me. She finished her speech, barely, and came down the steps with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sable," she said under her breath, "what the hell are you doing?" I tilted my head. "Letting people read what your staff sent me. You're trying to ruin everything I built." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I met her gaze with something I hadn't used in a long time, certainty. "I'm not ruining anything. I'm just reading the fine print out loud." Her hand moved before I saw it coming. A sharp sound cracked through the air, the back of her palm connecting with my face. It wasn't hard enough to knock me down, but it was hard enough to stop the room. The clinking of glasses, the quiet buzz of networking. It all stopped. I reached up and touched my cheek. My skin stung, but I didn't flinch. A waiter gasped. Someone snapped a photo. Another person whispered, "Is she pregnant?" Velma froze. Her eyes darted around, realizing, too late, that silence doesn't protect you when witnesses are watching. I looked at her and said calmly, "You should have checked the guest list twice." Then I walked out. That evening, I sat at the small kitchen table in my rented room, holding a bag of frozen peas against my cheek. It wasn't swelling much, but it was the principle. A knock came at the door. When I opened it, Trent was standing there. I hadn't seen him in years. "Didn't know if you still lived here," he said. "Wasn't sure you'd answer." "I almost didn't," I replied, but stepped aside anyway. He held a folder in his hand, but didn't offer it. I saw the video. "Of course you did," I said. "So did everyone else." He sat down across from me without being invited. She threatened me, you know? I raised an eyebrow. Back then, when we were together. Said if I didn't cut ties with you, she'd file something against me. Said it wouldn't be pretty. I didn't take her seriously. You should have. I know that now. I waited. I wasn't in the mood for recycled guilt. I came to say I'm sorry, he said, and I want to help. I stared at him for a moment. You want to help? Then help me finish what she started. He finally handed me the folder. Inside were financial records, donation logs, check copies, a list of shell organizations Velma had set up over the last 3 years. I looked at one line and blinked. My name. She signed off using my name, I whispered. She didn't just erase you, Sable. She used you. I nodded slowly. And now we use this. We spent the next hour organizing every piece of information, highlighting inconsistencies, mapping transaction trails, connecting shell companies. It was like watching the foundation she loved so much unravel stitch by stitch. By midnight, I uploaded the entire file set to a secure portal labeled Whistleblower Gideon Trust Fraud File. Then I sent a single message to Catherine, my attorney. Everything's ready. I'll be at the press briefing tomorrow. I closed the laptop, took a breath, and whispered into the quiet. She opened that hand to strike me. But I was already holding the match. I didn't sleep that night either, not really. My body went through the motions, brushing my teeth, folding the blanket, shutting off the light, but my mind stayed lit, pacing inside my head. By the time the sun was up, the damage had already made its rounds. Trent texted just after 7 a.m. Have you seen the news? I hadn't, but I knew. The kind of knowing that settles in your bones before your phone even lights up. I poured half a mug of coffee, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened the first article. Then the second. Then the tags. Slap, the quiet one. Hanley, hypocrisy. Donor darling turns violent. There it was, in 1080p. Velma, mid-swing. My face tilted. The entire room frozen, like they'd witnessed a car accident they weren't supposed to talk about. Every local station was playing it on loop. National outlets were beginning to pick it up too, each calling it a moment of high society cracking under its own image. In the background of one clip, someone gasped, "She's pregnant!" That was all it took. The media had a story, and Velma's team was scrambling. Trent walked into the kitchen 30 minutes later, fully dressed with that lawyer look again. Tie loose, jaw tight. "You're not reacting," he said, watching me from the doorway. I didn't look up from my screen. I'm already past the part where I react. I'm into the part where I respond. He nodded once. Let's get to it then. We moved to the table, pushed aside last night's tea mug, and opened the laptop. I pulled up the internal records he'd helped me gather, each one with forged entries, inflated donor names, and my own name tucked neatly into invoices I'd never seen before. Each document told a story. Shell companies using the foundation's funds to redirect money into fake programs, eventually deposited into accounts overseas. She'd signed many of them, not just with her name, but mine. Sloppily. Without my knowledge. What was she thinking? Trent asked, shaking his head as he clicked through a set of emails Velma never thought would surface. This isn't just unethical, it's criminal. She wasn't thinking, I said. She was performing. She thought she could write whatever script she wanted, and the audience would keep clapping. I paused, scrolling to a transaction labeled under a charity initiative called Voices for Grace. That's what she named her empowerment fund, right? I asked. He checked. Yeah, the irony's thick. We sat in silence for a beat. The hum of the refrigerator filled the room. I used to wonder why she kept me close, I said finally, even when she barely spoke to me. Now I know. I was the alibi, the silent sister, the extra name on the ledger that no one would question. Trent exhaled slowly. Well, she messed with the wrong quiet one. I opened a blank document. The digital report was clean, clear, and damning. I titled the file, Hanley Financial Irregularities, for disclosure. The subheading? Compiled by Sable Forrester, co-beneficiary, co-author, co-erased. By noon, Catherine had responded to my email with one sentence. "We have enough." She called 5 minutes later. "This is solid, Sable. Not just legally, but optically. If we time this with the current media narrative, we can push for an investigation and protect your stake." I leaned back, letting her words settle. "There's just one condition," I said. She paused. "Go on." "Let her try to discredit me first. Let her drag out the act, denials, half-statements, all of it. Then we drop the ledger." Catherine was silent on the line for a beat too long. "This is risky." "I'm not looking for revenge," I said. "I want people to see what she built her house on, before they see it fall." There was another pause. Then, "I'll time the press release accordingly." The call ended. I stared at the folder on my desktop for a long time before hitting compress and encrypt. I titled the file, Whistleblower, Gideon Trust Fraud File. I uploaded it to 3 places: the law firm's server, a personal cloud drive, and a portable flash stick tucked into a Ziploc bag in the bottom of my sock drawer. At 11:57 p.m., I was still sitting in that same chair, the glow of the screen soft on my face. Then the email came in. Subject line, "From Lorraine, urgent." I clicked it open. There was no greeting, no salutation, just a single sentence. "This wasn't supposed to happen. Please call me before you release anything." Attached was a PDF. I didn't open it. I stared at the screen, unmoved. No reply, no reaction, just breath, and the faint hum of cracks starting to form. Because when the walls start shaking, even the ones who helped build them feel the cracks. I didn't sleep. Again. But this time, it wasn't nerves. It was clarity. I sat in the quiet with that email from Lorraine still open, the attachment untouched. The woman who once corrected my posture at the dinner table and told me to smile even when you're not invited, now wanted me to keep quiet for the sake of the family name. It was 6:43 a.m. when I finally picked up the phone and dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. "Sable," she breathed out, like my name had weight all of a sudden. "I saw your email," I said, keeping my tone flat. "I didn't mean for it to come across as cold. I was—" She paused, then regrouped. "Velma made a mistake, but going public, that's not going to solve anything." "You mean it won't preserve your comfort?" I said. "No," she snapped a little too quickly. "I mean it won't help the child. Your child. Think about what kind of world you're bringing them into if you burn everything down." I stood by the window, watching the neighbor's dog chase nothing along the fence. "You weren't thinking about the child when Velma slapped me." Silence. "I've talked to people," she said. "There are ways we can resolve this quietly, cleanly, without all the noise." "Like we resolved Dad's will?" I asked. "Like we resolved the fake invoices with my name on them?" "You're being dramatic." "No," I said calmly. "I'm being exact." Her sigh dragged across the line. "If you go public, you'll destroy what's left of this family." "I think you're confusing silence with unity." Again. I hung up before she could answer. At 11:00 a.m., I received an invitation from Velma's attorney, Vaughn Lister. A polite request to meet in his office, to explore all avenues for resolution. I knew what that meant. I knew exactly how this played. I showed up at 2:00 p.m. sharp. Vaughn's office was in a brick building near the riverfront, with a view just charming enough to feel disarming. The receptionist offered me tea. I declined. The moment I stepped into his office, he stood and extended his hand like we were business partners. "Sable," he said. "Thanks for making time." I sat down across from him, keeping my bag in my lap. "I'll get to the point," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "My client wants to avoid dragging this through public channels. It's better for everyone, your family, your child, your reputation." I opened the folder. It was all there. A proposed non-disclosure agreement, a settlement check figure, a transfer of a modest house in a suburb I'd never wanted to live in. The catch? I walk away. No press. No claim to the trust. No legal follow-up. My name erased from everything I helped hold together. You'll get a home, Vaughn continued. A fresh start. This is the high road, Sable. I closed the folder slowly, keeping my eyes on him. Tell Velma, I said. I'm not expensive. I'm just done. His face tightened. You do understand what declining this means? I do, I said. It means she gets to worry for once. That night, I emailed Catherine with 3 words. They made contact. Then, I attached the file we'd built and labeled it GideonFall.zip. Every lie, every ledger, every photo, compressed into one folder. Before I logged off, I scanned the room and let myself breathe. This wasn't rage anymore. It was control. Later, I pulled out the old family photo Lorraine used to display in her living room. One of the last where we were all standing together. Velma at the center, of course. Lorraine's hand on her shoulder. Me, just slightly behind, like I wandered into the frame by mistake. I scanned it into my laptop. Digitally, I circled myself in red. Then, I added it to the first slide of my press briefing deck. Beneath it, I typed, the forgotten daughter, the used name, the one who kept the receipts. Let's see what happens when the quiet one speaks first, and everyone else has to follow. The city was still waking up when I stepped onto the sidewalk outside my apartment. The air smelled like dew on warm brick, one of those mornings that made Savannah feel timeless, like you could step back a century just by turning the corner. I walked slowly to Catherine's office, the thick manila envelope tucked under my arm like something sacred. Inside were the documents, the audio files, the photo I'd scanned the night before. The red circle around my face felt like a wound and a warning. The press conference wasn't scheduled until 9, but when I arrived just past 8:30, the sidewalk was already lined with folding chairs, news vans, and too many people holding lattes. They didn't seem to drink. Catherine met me outside. You don't have to go in, she said. We've got everything ready. I'll be speaking. You're the source. Stay out of the frame. That's the plan, I told her. I don't need the spotlight, just the truth to land. We stepped inside together. Velma was already at the podium, smoothing the front of her navy blazer like nothing could wrinkle her. Her voice floated over the speakers. Polished, familiar. I want to thank the community for their continued support during what has been an emotional and often mischaracterized week. She went on, painting herself as a woman under siege, a leader misunderstood, a sister who'd been taken out of context. Catherine and I stood at the back. She handed thick, sealed folders to each journalist present. Some opened them right away. Others clutched them like evidence in a courtroom. Within seconds, the murmurs began. One reporter held up a page and asked, "Is this the original will?" Another flipped to the invoice pages. "Did you authorize these signatures?" Velma's face didn't flinch, but her hand gripped the podium tighter. "Those documents, whatever they are, do not reflect the operations of our foundation," she said. "This is a smear campaign orchestrated by individuals with personal agendas." Then Catherine stepped forward. Those documents were certified by a third-party forensic analyst. The will was filed with the county recorder's office and predates the version used during the estate settlement. As for the financials, there are 43 invoices across 3 shell accounts, all linked to the Gideon Trust. Most were signed using 2 names. One of them is standing behind this podium. Velma opened her mouth but didn't speak. That was the first time I'd ever seen her speechless without meaning to be. I left before the questions got ugly. Catherine knew what to do from here. Downstairs, in the break room, usually reserved for paralegals and interns, I sat with my phone turned upside down. I didn't need updates. I didn't need alerts. What I needed was quiet. Trent walked in, 2 coffees in hand. "I figured you hadn't had one," he said. "You figured right." He handed me the cup and didn't ask how I was. He just sat beside me and waited. After a few sips, I said, "I didn't think it would feel like this." "Like what?" "Like, not winning, just finishing." He nodded. Sometimes that's enough. We sat in silence for a while. When the buzz from upstairs died down, we both stood. I was about to leave when one of the reporters spotted me through the glass door. "Miss Forrester?" she called. "Can I ask you a question?" I didn't move, but I didn't run either. "You're the woman from the video, aren't you?" she asked. "The one she—" "Yes," I said. "Do you have anything to say to the public or to your family?" I looked her square in the eye. "I'm not here to accuse," I said. "I'm here to remember out loud, because silence cost us too much." A pause. No one said anything. Then I turned and walked toward the exit. Outside, the light had changed. The press was still outside, but no one followed me. No camera in my face, no mic shoved under my chin, just me and my steps. My phone buzzed once. Lorraine. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked past the crowd, past the parked cars, past the bakery that had just opened its doors for the morning rush. I stopped at the corner and placed my hand gently over the curve of my belly. "You'll be born into truth," I whispered. "Not wealth, but not lies." And that, I knew, was more than enough. 3 weeks passed, quietly. No headlines, no microphones, no more calls. Lorraine never followed up on her message. Velma. She vanished from the social calendar like a canceled parade, no longer welcome at charity luncheons or featured in the Sunday Bulletin at St. Agnes. Her name, once printed across gala programs and donor walls, now lived in the footnotes of a pending audit. The foundation she built was under full review. Its board dissolved. Her accounts frozen. She wasn't arrested, but in this town, exile moves faster than law. I never made another statement. The one I gave was enough. Savannah kept moving like it always does. Soft mornings, hot afternoons, and evenings that smelled like magnolia and old stories. And me? I kept going too. But slower, gentler. With purpose this time. I spent those weeks preparing. For birth, for change, for the kind of beginning that doesn't need applause. Just a clean floor, a warm light, and no lies. That Monday, at 7:26 a.m., I met my daughter. Her first cry cracked something open in me I didn't know was still sealed. I didn't weep. I just exhaled like I'd been holding my breath since my father died. They asked if I wanted to list the father. I said, "Not today." I named her Elia Grace. Not a family name. Not something passed down from a line that forgot how to listen. Her name was hers. A beginning without baggage. When they placed her on my chest, I whispered, "You won't inherit my silence, only my strength." In the days that followed, we fell into our own rhythm. Feedings, diaper changes, long, quiet afternoons with the curtains drawn halfway to keep the sun off her skin. The world felt smaller and better. One afternoon, I sat on the nursery floor with her wrapped in a soft yellow blanket, one I crocheted myself in the last weeks of pregnancy. The walls were painted the color of sunflowers, just like I promised myself the night I walked away from Lorraine's table. I hung a single picture above the crib. Not Velma, not Lorraine, just my father. Standing in his workshop, sleeves rolled, smile worn like he earned it. It reminded me of who saw me first. Trent stopped by one evening. He didn't come with speeches or expectations, just diapers and coffee and an awkward offer. "If you ever want a co-parent in any form," he said, "I'm here, no strings." I smiled, tired but real. "I might need a weekend babysitter before I need anything else." He laughed, and for a second the air felt soft. No damage, just room. A few days later, Catherine called. "Velma isn't filing any motion. She's done." "Good," I said. "So are we." There was no celebration, no corks popping or hugs exchanged. Just the click of an email sent, and a feeling like setting down a heavy box you'd carried too far. That night, while Elia slept in the bassinet beside my bed, I opened my journal and began to write her a letter. Not because I needed to unburden anything, but because she deserved to know the truth before the world tried to tell her otherwise. Elia, I was the quiet one, but I remembered everything, and because of that, you won't have to. You'll grow up knowing the cost of secrets and the value of your own voice. You won't be raised on stories that sound sweet but rot underneath. You'll be raised on real things, like this city's smell after rain, and how strength isn't loud but steady. How sometimes the best thing you can do for a family is to stop pretending one still exists when it doesn't. You won't have to keep anyone's name but your own. You're not a legacy, you're a clean page. I folded the letter and slid it into the back of the journal, tucked between notes on feeding schedules and milestone checklists. Then I sat by the window, Elia curled on my chest, and watched the sky shift from purple to gold. No vengeance, no apology, just a mother and a morning. Legacy isn't what you inherit. It's what you stop repeating.